We're here near the village of Taber in southern Alberta, known for its corn, its potatoes, its rich soil. But in recent years, farmers in this region have had to deal with low water levels. When you find yourself in a situation like that, you have to find an alternative. And for many farmers, it means the water market. So we came down here to find out how that works and what the challenges associated with it are.
My name is Allison Davey, and I'm one of the owners of North Paddock Farms, and we farm just south of Taber. We're all under irrigation. We grow potatoes, seed canola, timothy, hay, wheat, flax, faba beans, and garlic. And this year we're facing an unprecedented drought, which is, the first in my history on the farm. So if we need more water in this area, we look to see if there's any available to purchase. You've got neighbors sometimes, they're not going to use their allocation, and they're more than willing to share, or if they can't give a whole acre allotment, then they might just give you a couple of inches or something at the end of the year. So all of that extra water comes at an extra cost that's over and above already our growing costs.
Water in Alberta is regulated by licenses. Farmers like Allison don't hold licenses themselves. She's part of an irrigation district. The irrigation district holds the license, and they decide how much water is allocated to individual farmers. If Allison wants more water, she has to buy allocation from someone else within the district. Allison is paying a lot of money for water allocations, but that's just one aspect of the water market. Because of southern Alberta's semi-arid nature, competition for water is strong.
Anybody who's diverting significant quantities of water from surface water sources, rivers, streams, lakes, has to have a water license.
That's Davin McIntosh. He's a lawyer who helps his clients get water rights. One of his first license transfer clients was Cross Iron Mills, a mall just north of Calgary.
Calgary had the water. They wouldn't extend services outside the city. And so that development wouldn't have happened if they hadn't found another way to get the water.
A mall takes a fair amount of water to build and operate. Now you might be wondering, why couldn't they just apply for their own water license? And there's a long story to that.
In 2007, a moratorium meant that no new licenses to take surface water would be issued by the government anymore. Research over the previous 20 or 30 years had revealed that if all of the water licenses issued, and many of them had been issued up to 100 years ago, without expiry dates, were exercised, then there'd be a critical shortage of water in our rivers. And so the only way that people who needed new water rights could get them was to convince an existing license holder to give up their right. And the government wasn't going to intervene in how to convince people, and so it created a market. And so all of a sudden, overnight, licenses went from nominal value to significant value.
So how does the government decide on who gets first dibs on water? Well, it's a system called first in time, first in right, and it's based on seniority. It means those who were issued licenses first have rights to water first. So if your water license was the earliest registered, that means you're the first to the water buffet, taking as much water as is allocated to you. And it means everyone behind you has to take from what's left.
And there's no discrimination under the first in time, first in right system based on what the water's purpose is. So you could have a golf course with a senior license and you're activating the first in time, first in right system. Calgary, one of their big licenses, is a 1981 seniority license, which is considered quite junior. So you've got a city of 1.3 million people, and a priority call takes place and suddenly, there's no water available under that license. And I honestly don't think that nobody wants to initiate those priority calls. We're all avoiding it. I mean, that's the reason for the water agreement. We're avoiding have to take those priority calls.
You can start to see how this becomes difficult in a situation where there's not a lot of water to go around. Someone has to step in and set some ground rules.
So if everybody is able to reduce their water use by a certain amount, even if there are lower flows, there's less water in the reservoirs, we have enough water so that everybody has access to some.
And that's what the province says it's trying to do. Municipalities, industry, and irrigation districts have all signed on to water sharing agreements and said they would reduce their water use. But here's the kicker. The agreements are voluntary. Those water agreements are meant to manage the year ahead. But demand for water will continue with ongoing water scarcity. And the moratorium means there will be more competition for the licenses that do exist in southern Alberta. Proponents of the market say markets like these help all of us recognize and realize the value of water. But there are concerns at play here too.
If you are on the winning side of that and you're making a huge profit, that isn't right either. Because let's face it, water is a fundamental basic human right. And what I'd like to get to one day, hopefully, is a more regulated market where you have kind of a cap and trade type system where there's a minimum pricing level that is up to a certain use.
The value of something like water depends very much on how valuable the use is. A market has evolved, and so there are some sort of benchmark prices created by transactions, but it is an opaque market. There's no public record of the value of water rights transfers. And so a lot of it just has to do with perceived value or advice that buyers and sellers get from someone like me.
And the provincial government is aware of the concerns.
You know, I've heard concerns with that from other Albertans, that they would like to see some transparency in how essentially that process works. But we do have to have the conversation about then what that looks like.
Yeah, if you're 80% potatoes, then obviously you're going to be looking for more water, because it comes down to how desperate are you for the water. Obviously, if you really need the water, you're willing to pay more. And if you have water and this is kind of just like a bonus water, then you would pay a little less. So there's no set standard. You know, there's the rumor mill, but that's about all you've got to go off of.
It's your typical supply and demand problem. There's a lot of demand for dwindling supply. But as a reminder, for a lot of people working in southern Alberta, this impacts their livelihood.